conspiracies afoot. I know what it's like to be. What's the word we should use at this point? I know what it's like to be. I know what it's like to understand stuff, right? I don't understand everything, but if I've understood Brexit, then I've understood anything. I know what it's like to understand how bad things are and how significant it was yesterday when Rishi Sunak accidentally admitted that being in the European Union is the best available scenario for any part of the United Kingdom. And I said to you yesterday, don't expect to see that big in the right-wing media. Probably only The Guardian would report it. Guess what? Proved right again. But it's not a plan. The Daily Telegraph don't respond to Rishi Sunak's epic clangor yesterday by going, "Oh, let's run that story about Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages to distract attention from the fact that Rishi Sunak accidentally told the truth about Brexit yesterday." They don't do that. The Daily Mail just will run with something completely different. Just ignore what was by some distance the most significant development in the world of British politics yesterday. The Daily Mail will put police, we fear that their baby has come to harm on the front page. A big story, a heartbreaking story that has absolutely nothing to do with the major political events of the day before. And also on their front page, and this is where I'm going to direct your attention in a moment. It's very important to remember what the Daily Mail is and what the Daily Mail has done to this country over the last few years, mostly under the editorship of a man called Paul Dacre, who's expecting to be put in the House of Lords by a man called Boris Johnson. Just bear that in mind. There's also reports in this week's Private Eye that the current editor, a man called Ted Verity, is expecting to get a knighthood from a man called Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, the same man who yesterday saw all of his lies and deceptions about the so-called oven-ready deal that would allegedly get Brexit done fall apart like a cheap suit. But that doesn't matter. He's still entitled to a resignation honours list. And the man who presided over the most disgusting episode in the history of British newspapers, with the possible exception of phone hacking, is set to get a seat in the House of Lords, while his successor is reportedly looking at a knighthood, which explains why they maintain their sycophantic approach to Boris Johnson, despite the fact that the rest of the world is slowly waking up to what an absolute charlatan he is. So this is the newspaper that went after High Court judges for having the audacity to both understand and enact the law. Enemies of the people is a phrase that is associated with the rise of the Nazis in 1930s Germany. Enemies of the people, a front page headline so gross, so vicious, so dangerous that in a vaguely normal country, the man responsible for it would have been drummed out of the establishment, never mind elevated to the House of Lords. Enemies of the people, and then crush the saboteurs. The MPs who have now been proved categorically correct about everything were desperate to prevent Boris Johnson from leaving the European Union without any deal at all, or even perhaps resisting calls for a second. Crush the saboteurs. So under Theresa May, I think that headline appeared. The idea that people who understood stuff shouldn't be able to exercise their democratic right in the House of Commons to vote according to things that they actually understood. And if you think that's an exaggeration, have a look back at the votes for the withdrawal agreement. All the people who spent yesterday talking about what a bang-up job Rishi Sunak had done were, not that long ago, talking about what a bang-up job Boris Johnson had done by bringing in the deal that Rishi Sunak had to undo. This isn't normal, and it's not fair. It's not fair on ordinary people. It's not fair on businesses. It's not fair on farmers. It's not fair on doctors and nurses who have to deal with epic staff shortages. It's not fair on anybody who relies upon Labour to keep their businesses afloat. It's not fair upon people already hit hard by the cost of living crisis who are having layer upon layer upon layer of extra and unnecessary expense inflicted upon their lives. It is not fair upon people whose families have been torn apart by the racist lies of elements of the Vote Leave or the Leave.eu or the UKIP movement. It's not fair that liars managed to grab our country by the windpipe and squeeze it until the flow of oxygen to the brain had been sufficiently cut off to deliver a referendum result that we will be ruing and regretting for generations to come. So yes, it was significant yesterday. Abuse, its depictions of so-called Remainers were as dishonest and as deceitful as they were dangerous. She today dedicates an entire page to asking you to feel sorry for her because of what Brexit has done to her life. Imagine marching behind Paul Dacre into the Brexit battle. Imagine being one of the one of the key elements of the Daily Mail's attack upon normality and truth under Paul Dacre's dismal editorship. Just imagine that. Imagine having your face appearing on the front page of a newspaper that has headlines or front page splashes including the dread phrases, enemies of the people or crush the saboteurs. Have a look at what has happened to some of the people on that side of British politics subsequently and tell me in what possible circumstances you will accept Sarah Vine's invitation this morning to feel sorry for her. So that's two of them now. That's Brexit hardman Steve Baker and the sort of leading Daily Mail columnist looking at the carnage of the Brexit that they cheered and championed to the point of unleashing appalling abuse on people dedicated to explaining the truth. And they're now asking for your sympathy. They're asking for your compassion. Brexit cost me friendships and my marriage. I pray Rishi can finally end this uncivil war. A Daily Mail columnist asking for you to display common decency towards her for the consequences of a political decision she spent the last 7 years cheering to the rafters. It's right up there with Steve Baker, expressing really nothing but sympathy for himself in the context of the consequences of what he was key in inflicting upon the population of this country. It's actually, you can tell by my voice, it's actually incredible. I have spent some years extolling the virtues of the following phrase: contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. One of the maddest moments of my life probably involves standing on a stage in Parliament Square, looking out at a sea, reportedly 1 million, I don't think there was that many, looking at 1 million people and countless banners reflecting that catchphrase back to me. Just this, gob on a stick on the radio, trying to come up with a way of marshalling anger and making sure it was pushed in the right direction. 0345 6060 973 is the number you're going to need. How do we make sure the anger goes in the right direction? Don't get cross with your mum, get cross with Jacob Rees-Mogg. Don't get cross with your Uncle Keith, get cross with Boris Johnson. Don't get cross with your nan, get cross with Sarah Vine. How do you focus the righteous fury that everyone should feel about what these true saboteurs have done to our country? Easy. You remember to distinguish between con man or con woman and con victim. Contempt for the con man, compassion for the conned.
Fuck all of them, mate.
So what the flip do you do when it's the con man asking you for your compassion? I genuinely don't know. I feel a little bit troubled that my natural reservoirs of compassion appear to have run dry for these kinds of people. I feel nothing but sympathy for Steve Baker's mental anguish, but the causes of his mental anguish? I don't know where you even begin to articulate the fury that the rest of us feel about at what people like that have done to our country. So what do you do? Give me your advice. Let's do it this way round. Okay? If you, like me, subscribe to the notion that you should feel contempt for the con man, but compassion for the conned, and without really realizing it, you've adopted that position from a place of not really wanting to feel contempt for anyone. It's not a comfortable place to go to. It's almost an example of coming down to the level of the people of whom you disapprove, but occasionally it's permitted. Contempt for the con man, compassion for the conned. I think we're seeing the beginning of a process under which a number of deeply narcissistic people are going to start asking you to feel compassion for them as a consequence of the impact of the Brexit they wanted and they used to attack countless other people finally coming home to roost. So how do we do it? They're feeling sorry for themselves. Should we be feeling sorry for them? My God, they're feeling sorry for themselves. Oh, poor me. Poor me. I pray Sunak succeeds so as individuals and as a nation we can put this civil war behind us. Show me the letter you've written to Paul Dacre objecting to his Crush the Saboteurs front page or his Enemies of the People front page. You work for an organ that did more to foster the hatreds that have torn this country apart than any other institution in the United Kingdom. And now you're asking us to feel sorry for you? And there's my problem.
If you're over 50 in the UK without life insurance, do not buy a policy before you watch this video.
Anymore. I might as well wear a T-shirt saying, I understand nothing. I understand nothing. Not only did I encourage you to vote for it, but now I'm pretending that it's all done and dusted, it's game over, and it's time to move on. I could have it tattooed across my forehead. I understand nothing, and I hold you in complete contempt. That's the editor of the Daily Mail for you. Shifting in the blink of an eye from claiming that Boris Johnson, no, let's get this absolutely right, from claiming that Theresa May displayed the steel of the new Iron Lady to claiming that that Boris Johnson was the Messiah in short trousers, to claiming that Liz Truss was the answer to all of the nation's problems, to claim it, and they've never really been that warm about Rishi Sunak, but now they're greeting his so-called Windsor Agreement as the impossible. He's done the impossible. Do you know what Rishi Sunak has done? Come here a minute, I'll tell you. Rishi Sunak has recognised reality.
He was the chancellor, though.
It is
up.
absolutely heartbreaking
He was the one
to think that we have somehow created a country in which recognising reality is remarkable. And it's a very rare example of something upon which we can almost all agree. And God knows those examples are very, very thin on the ground at the moment, have been now for a while, but we can almost all agree that this is remarkable. That's incredible. The deniers of reality and the describers of the denial of reality unite today to reflect upon how remarkable it is that reality is now being recognized. I find it almost, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. I find it almost impossible to articulate how bonkers this is. It is the first glimmer of rational behaviour from a UK Prime Minister since Theresa May was in Downing Street. The rest of it has been denial and delusion, inflated to ludicrous proportions by ridiculous human beings like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, and Brexit hardman Steve Baker, who's had a bit of an odd conversion. And he spoke very poignantly about the damage done to his mental health by the trials and tribulations of the last 7 years. One has nothing but sympathy for such experiences and respect for his honesty in talking about them. But of course, neither does it give anybody a free pass for the responsibility they bear for the madness inflicted on the country. I think he deserves huge praise for essentially admitting to guilt and a sense of shame. I presume these are the burdens that have put pressure on his mental health, staring at the country and seeing it going in precisely the opposite direction to the one that you promised millions of people that it would go in. You remember the cheaper food or whatever it may have been, the money for the NHS, the booming economy, whatever it was that I cannot imagine. He's the only one honest enough, and I presume this is what he has been broken by. He's the only one honest enough to acknowledge that everything's gone appallingly wrong. So I don't think anyone should blame him for clutching at a straw yesterday, that this somehow signals the end of the process. The process has barely begun. We haven't even imposed the full terms and conditions of the bits of the withdrawal agreement, the main bits of the withdrawal agreement that haven't been changed yet.
Fuck all of them cunts. Every single one of them. The whole of them need to go to prison. The blood clot. He was the chancellor. He was passing laws talking about furlough scheme,
Darlings, are you
at home, all this bullshit. Fuck Rishi Sunak.
You're looking at a prisoner. You're looking at a prisoner. Someone who's waited to be free. Waited to be free. You're looking at a prisoner. You're looking at a prisoner. Someone who's waited to be free. Waited to be free. That's why me number one, me not beg, but I pay that game so in that head. From your disrespect, my once you can't do that again. From a little and I go, my granny used to tell me, say, every me could make a muckle, so no big